Sitting with the lights off, waiting for my brain to storm, trying to work things out. It's thunder and it's lightning and it's all things too frightening. I could barely see outside. Black and blue, being struck twice is nothing new. Your body was black and blue, being struck twice is nothing new. Your body was black and blue. 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 Your body was black and blue.
Folks, just about another 30 more seconds and we'll get started.
Your body was
Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, hello, hello out there. Who is out there? Come on into class. Well, yeah. So I don't even know how to begin. Crazy week, I guess. I don't know. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time to talk about it, but I'm glad it looks like we've got, how many of us here today? We have, I don't know, 19 of us out of our 34 who are supposed to be here. So obviously a lot of people still without power or internet, which is really too bad. So folks, let's real quickly, let's do this in the chat. Just to kind of continue that tradition. In the chat, what did you do to pass time while the power was out? What did you do to pass time while share with me, please? Wait, how do you do yo-yo? Brody got a yo-yo. Minecraft, I thought you needed power for that. Sleep, yeah, it's a good time to hit cards. Oh yeah. Sleep, yeah, I guess it is a good time to catch up on sleep. Geometry Dash, don't know what that is. Okay, some people read, yeah, okay. It's hey, well listen, folks, hopefully everybody is doing well now. I know things are not ideal by any means, and it would be nice if we didn't have to you know, if we could kind of take a break here, especially for those people who aren't here. But we do just need to power on because we've missed a few days of class. But we'll just try to work that out in the schedule. So if you didn't already see, I did post an ed puzzle of me talking about some notes on the other day. And so that's something you do need to do. That is an assignment that's going to go in the grade book. So make sure you do that. And it's really important stuff because it's, you know, it's the basis of what we're going to continue on with. So it's not a huge deal if you kind of get it out of order, you know, if we do today's class, but you really need to do that Edpuzzle right away as soon as you can. I'm going to be really, you know, easy on due dates and things like that. I know people are in all sorts of positions. People might be, you know, at hotels or who knows where. The other thing, just before the break, we took those 2 tests, political geography tests. And so I have graded those, most of them, if you got them in the other day. Part 2, I still haven't graded for everybody. If you still haven't turned that in, please do that. You need to do political geography test part 2. So please do that. And then also there is the, on the My AP College Board website, there is of course that multiple choice test that I would like everybody to do. So please make sure to carve out some time in the next weekend or so to do that. Anyway, so with that said, I am going to just dive into the learning. We did, like I said, we did skip over a couple pages that are on that Edpuzzle that you need to take a look at. Where we're going to go, and just by way of reminder, there are FRQs in this packet that you're just going to mostly just kind of do on your own. Again, we just don't have time to do the FRQs all together. I get a question about the test. Wait, where was this test? Ian, if you mean the second political geography FRQ, it's just posted on Google Classroom. It's called Political Geography FRQ Part 2.
Oh, it's the FRQ. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so if you didn't get to that, please do that. Okay, everybody. And then of course the multiple choice test on the My AP website. And if you're having any trouble with getting on there, please let me know and we'll work that out. Okay. All right. So if hopefully you have the booklet. I think Lake Ridge is open. So if by any chance you don't have the booklet, I would definitely get that today. But we're going to dive into, again, like I said, dive into the learning. And we're going to start talking about forms of agriculture, different types of agriculture. It looks like I've said forms and types in different places, but shoot, just a sorry. When you get out of your hat, it's a little awkward. Okay, so here goes. Okay, so in the video I recorded for you that I would like everybody to look at, I talked about a few different things. One of them being the Columbian Exchange. This idea, this concept of, you know, when all the different biological material between the old and the new world kind of mixed. And so we're on page 17, folks. We're on page 17. Okay. So yeah, so I talked about this idea of the Columbian Exchange, so definitely go back to the Edpuzzle and do that. But then I also talked about this concept of subsistence versus commercial agriculture. So again, this is on the recording that I did. And we actually, you might want to, if you haven't watched the recording, what we should do is you should turn to page 13. And on page 13, I have a T-chart to kind of address this difference between subsistence and commercial agriculture. And so we should go over this now, just especially because we can't really move on until everybody understands the difference between subsistence and commercial agriculture. Okay, so I'm going to go through this. And again, there's a T-chart on page 13 that talks about this, where you could jot down the differences. So I have this in red because normally it's something I review because we've already done it. But in this case, most of you are seeing this for the first time. So subsistence, you should definitely write this down on page 13. So subsistence agriculture is primarily in developing countries. And we'll see in the next unit when we talk about development, we sometimes call these developing countries LDCs, or less developed countries. I wouldn't worry about that too much. Just know that subsistence agriculture is primarily in developing countries, okay? Developing countries. And again, subsistence, this will get to this, but you know, the word subsistence and the word commercial basically kind of tell the story of what the differences are. Subsistence means, you know what the word subsist means, it just means to live on, right? Subsistence. And commercial means to sell, okay? So those are the basics, right? But here are some things within that. So for commercial agriculture, primarily in developed countries, okay? Most people in developed countries do not just grow food for themselves. So those are the big differences. So the food is consumed by the farmers. Okay, I missed a punctuation there, but the food that is grown is usually consumed by the farmer's family. And again, we're on page 13, where we're jotting down some notes about subsistence versus commercial agriculture. And in commercial agriculture, the food is intended for sale off the farm, okay? So subsistence agriculture is where the people who are growing it are planning on eating it themselves. But, you know, for commercial agriculture, you know, if you've got a wheat farm of you know, 1,000 acres, you're not just eating wheat, you know, all the time. Or if you've got a big, huge, you know, soybean farm, your family is not eating soybeans 3 meals a day. So they're just selling that stuff, okay? Subsistence farms tend to be less mechanized, so there's a lot of hand tools. Animal power is used, right? To like pull plows and things like that. But for commercial agriculture, it's heavily mechanized. Lots of tractors, lots of machines. So subsistence agriculture tends to be much smaller farms, whereas commercial agriculture tends to be very large farms, okay? Continuing on, moving on. So more people tend to be engaged in farming, okay? So it's very labor intensive. Subsistence farming tends to be labor intensive. And all this kind of makes sense. So if you have, you know, if you're kind of looking at this to make sense, if you're less mechanized, right? If you just have hand tools and things like that, you're going to have smaller farms, right? You can't have a big, huge farm if you don't have machines. So that just makes sense. And then of course, if you have machines, there's going to be more people engaged in farming. It's going to be much more labor intensive, right? There's going to be more people have to work the farms. But with commercial farming, few people are involved in farming. So it's only about 2 to 3% in most developed countries. So in the United States, Canada, Australia, most of Europe, they're only about 2 to 3% of people are farmers. And why is that? It's because all of these things are related, right? If you're highly mechanized, you have few people involved in farming. It's just kind of makes sense. Okay. And lastly, subsistence farmers tend to have few fertilizers and herbicides. And I'm just going to say other chemicals, because they just many times they can't afford them. Those tend to be very expensive, and we'll talk a lot more about that. But in terms of commercial farming, there tends to be a lot of technology, fertilizers, herbicides for killing weeds, and pesticides for killing bugs and things like that. Okay, so with that said, let's so that's kind of the breakdown between subsistence and commercial agriculture. And again, if you've already done that Edpuzzle that's posted on Google Classroom, you already got that. If you didn't, make sure to jot this down right now, because we're going to talk about the differences right now. Okay. And again, that was on page 13. But once you're done with that, let's jump to page 17. And what I've done is, what we're looking at is, we're going to be looking at, there's a map that we're going to use quite a bit, and I'll explain it. I'll show you more in a second. But we're going to talk about all the different types of farming that are described in your textbook. Okay. But before we do that, oh shoot, I don't think I have a place. Looks like I didn't make a place for this. I've just got a couple of notes about climate regions. We're not going to go into too much detail about this, because you know, climate regions is more of a physical geography topic as opposed to a human geography topic. But there are a couple things I do want you to note. Okay, so the first thing is, well, you can ignore that question, but you should think about what restricts what can grow in a certain places. So, you know, I already kind of revealed that, but you know, there's basically two things. Well, there's more than that, but there's essentially two things that restrict what can grow. And remember, we talked a little about this at the very beginning of the population unit. It's all about where do people live. And we talked about the two there is the 4 twos, and I mean two in the sense TOO. The 4 twos are too high. If anybody, you can't grow stuff at altitude. You can't grow stuff where it's too dry. You can't grow stuff where it's too cold, and you can't grow stuff where it's too wet. Okay, so those are the things. So most crops don't really grow in dry, cold, or high places. Okay, most crops do not grow. And again, on page 17, we're on page 17, but I didn't put a place for you guys to jot down these notes. So just kind of find a place to jot this down. We're on page 17. So most crops don't grow in dry, cold, or high places. So as a result, some crops only grow in some crops grow in tropical places. So in places that are really wet. So for example, many grains can't grow. So for example, especially like wheat and barley cannot grow in tropical areas. Okay, so they just don't, you can't grow wheat and barley in tropical areas. You can grow other things, but for the most part, you can't grow wheat and barley. Okay, and we'll talk more about that. So as a result, and again, another important point, remember way back at the beginning of the class, we talked about this difference between environmental determinism, which is like where the natural environment actually kind of determines how people live, versus possibilism, which is this idea that humans can, overcome anything that the human nature throws at them. And the idea, this is certainly a good example of environmental determinism, right? You can want to grow wheat in the Congo all you want. You can want to grow wheat in Indonesia. You really want to grow wheat in Indonesia, good for you, but you're not going to be able to do it because it just won't grow properly. It gets diseases and all sorts of things. So great example of environmental determinism. Okay, here's a climate regions map. And again, this is more physical geography. There are a few times in this class where physical geography really kind of plays a role. And this is one of them. I am not going to ask you to try to memorize this map by any means. I don't have it memorized, but you should just be aware that, some of the features of it are, and you do not have this. This is not the same map that's on page 17. This is a different map. But you should definitely note that there are places, for example, where there are deserts, the Sahara Desert, the Great Sandy Desert in Australia, the Gobi Desert here, and the Southwest of the United States. These are places where crops just don't grow, or much of the Middle East, you can't grow any crops. You don't grow plants for the most part. And we'll talk about what grows there or what is raised there. And then of course you have places where it's just too wet for certain things around the equator. These are going to be tropical areas. And then of course up in the northern latitudes, it's too cold for most crops. Okay, so you should just have a general idea of where some of these places are that can't grow crops, or only certain crops could be grown there. So I'm going to go back to this real quick. Well, it looks like people are jotting down some of these notes. So what I'm going to do is now we're going to go to page again. We're going to start talking about each of the different types of agriculture. When I say types of agriculture, these are some geographers have decided there's certain categories of agriculture that each kind of method or way of growing food is categorized. And so we're going to go through. They have unique and important features that will certainly be to know. So the first thing to note is before agriculture. This is just kind of as an aside. How did all humans get their food? Well, all humans got their food from hunting and gathering, okay? So agriculture, as we talked about before, it was over a week ago now, about 10,000 years ago, people started to practice agriculture in the Fertile Crescent. And then slowly but surely it spread out to other places like the, China, places in South America, the Andes region, Central America, Southeast Asia, what is today Pakistan, the Indus River Valley. Anyway, before that, everybody practiced hunting and gathering. So now we're going to talk about some of the different agricultural regions. And this is the map you guys have on page 17. And this map we're going to look at a number of different times. I'm going to try to help you figure out where these different places, what, I'm going to ask you to try to shade these things on your map as much as possible. And I know it's going to look a little bit disorganized and things like that, but we're just going to do our best trying to figure out where all these different types of agriculture are. Okay. So the first thing, and I would like you to try to shade your map as much as possible, but at the very least, let's point out some countries where these types of agriculture are practiced. Now, I'll just point out that this map is a little bit chaotic and it's very busy, okay? So I'm going to try to simplify it and just make sure you know some of the important places around the world where certain types of agriculture are practiced, okay? So while we look at the different types of agriculture, we will also try to identify what countries they practice this type of agriculture, okay? So the first one we're going to talk about is something called pastoral nomadism, okay? Pastoral nomadism, and you can see on page 17, there's a place for you to jot down notes about pastoral nomadism, and then we'll try to identify on the map where that's taking place. Okay, so first of all, pastoral nomadism just means herding animals. Okay, herding animals, and so these are mostly in dry places. So I just pointed out in the map that we were just looking at that there are places around the world that are too dry to grow crops. So there's places that are too dry to grow crops, deserts for the most part. Well, those places do not, it's not as if nothing happens there. What usually happens is people herd animals in those places. Okay, so it's often, and we'll look at where those places are in a second. So some examples are camels are often herded in some of the driest places. So think it's the really deserty places like the Sahara Desert, places like that. Those are going to be animals like camels. Goats, just kind of as an example of some of the different animals that are herded, goats will eat almost anything. So they'll eat, different scrubby plants and, thorny bushes and pretty much anything. So goats can pretty much exist in almost any place around the world. So sheep tend to need more water and are more selective about the plants they eat. So sheep are not as hardy as goats. And then there's also reindeer in cold climates is another example of pastoral nomadism. And there's also some cattle in some places. So they do have cattle in some places. Okay, but cattle are actually a little bit less common than like goats and sheep and reindeer. Okay, so I'll go back to that slide here in a second, but I want to have a sense of where is this happening. So on your map, I know this is kind of hard to see, but what I would like you to try to do is try to shade in where is this pastoral nomadism. So it's all this blue area. Okay, so most of the Sahara Desert down here into Somalia and places like this, down here in Southern Africa and in the different deserts down here, the Kalahari Desert, and then most of the Middle East up into Iran and places like this. There's a lot of herding of animals, and then of course Western China and up into Mongolia and places like that, Central Asia. There's a lot of herding of animals. Okay, so that's called pastoral nomadism. So I would take a second, and again, the examples, I was trying to make the point that you should also jot down some countries involved. So, I would say most of the Sahara Desert, that says Sarah, not Sahara, Sahara Desert, and then countries like Mongolia, Iran, Saudi Arabia. So those are just some examples of where is pastoral nomadism practiced, okay? So so definitely jot those things down. So a couple of things to add to this. So first of all, they often trade for grain. Pastoral nomads cannot live by themselves. They actually have to be farmers around pastoral nomads for them to kind of work that out. And so that's one thing. They often trade for grain. And so the size of their herd is often considered to be an indicator of their wealth. So that's another kind of feature of pastoral nomadism. Other things, so they're usually milked rather than butchered for the most part. What seems a little counterintuitive is when you have pastoral nomads usually don't butcher their animals. Only on rare occasions do they butcher their animals, because what they use their animals for is they usually use them. So they get milk, but also they get wool often, wool for making things like rugs. Okay, so that was, and then the rugs are often, those sorts of things are what you're gonna, the wool and the rugs is what you trade the grain for the grain. Okay, so that's often how you get grain, is but when you trade things like wool or things like that. And they don't, because if they butcher their animals, then they're not gonna have wool and they're not gonna have milk. And the other thing is they also bleed them for protein. So that might seem a little odd to us, but it's not very uncommon. It's actually very common that they will take some of their blood, and that would be used for to use as food. Okay, so last thing I want to jot down is this idea of transhumance. So transhumance is this seasonal migration between mountains and lowlands. So we talked about this term before. I talked about this in the migration unit. Transhumance is the seasonal migration between mountains and lowlands. And to be clear, that's with your animals, with a herd animals. Okay, so this word transhumance is an important geography topic or term that you need to know. Seasonal migration between mountains and lowlands with your animals. Okay. So that's called pastoral nomadism. And again, that happens in dry places. Mongolia, Iran are some examples. Sahara Desert, all those places where that's happening. And just to remind us, these are the places. Okay. All right. So let's move on. And hopefully you got that. I never know if I'm going too fast, or probably am. So the next topic is, or the next type of, and by the way, just to be clear, just to say, if you look at all these places where there's this blue, where they practice pastoral nomadism, it's not to say they don't have other, they don't have other types of farming happening. Farming is, this is just where the majority of this is the type is pastoral nomadism. So don't understand that nothing is happening besides pastoral nomadism. It's just and we'll talk more about that when we look at some other places also. So the next concept or type of farming is called shifting cultivation. Okay, so shifting cultivation is also sometimes called slash and burn agriculture. We call it shifting cultivation, and I'll explain why it's called that. And it's got both names kind of self-explanatory, but we'll just talk about this. First of all, it mostly happens in tropical regions, okay? And it not just mostly, it basically is only in tropical regions, okay? So in tropical regions, what happens is the forest is cut down in these places and burned. And that's where they get the term slash and burn. You cut down the forest and you burn it. And I'll come back to that in a second. I'll show you where this is happening here in a second. But again, just to be clear, and does say this on page 17, but maybe you could go ahead and highlight this or circle it where it says what we're talking about now, and same with pastoral nomadism. This is a type of subsistence agriculture, okay? Just to be clear, this is type of subsistence agriculture. Okay, so let's look at where are they practicing this. So slash and burn or shifting cultivation is here in the Amazon, okay, here in right along the equator. Again, this is primarily in tropical places, but again, in the Amazon, they practice it. Most of Central Africa, right, the tropical regions around the equator of Africa, and then down here in parts of Indonesia. That's where they're going to be practicing shifting cultivation. So you should try to identify that as much as you can on your map. We'll give you a minute to do that. Okay. So why is it called shifting cultivation? Here it goes. So the forest is cut down and burned, and then the plot is only fertile for a few years. So what happens is the burning of the trees, the ashes are like fertilizer. And so, but the thing is, they have to, it's only fertile for a few years. So, and then they have to shift. And that's the important point here. Why is it called shifting agriculture? Because you have to shift to another plot of land. Okay. You have to leave, and then you have to leave this idea, the place you've grown the food on, you need to leave it fallow for maybe up to 20 years. So fallow, for those of you who don't know, means not growing anything on it. So they would leave it for a while, and then maybe they'd come back to it in a while, in 20 years later. And then they would just shift around to these plots. So you burn down a plot, and then you grow your food there, and then you have to shift to another plot after the land is no longer fertile. Okay, so that's called shifting cultivation. Yeah, so it's really important that idea of moving moving from one plot to another is a key feature of shifting cultivation. You can see here a picture of these people burning their crops, not their crops, but the forest. And I'll show you another picture here in a second. But another important vocab word that you definitely need to know is this word swidden. And I'm not sure what language it comes from. I'm not sure if it's English. I would doubt it because most people aren't English speakers in these places. But anyway, a swidden is the cleared area for planting. And so that's the name of the area that you clear out to plant your crops. It's called a swidden. Okay. So generally what's grown in these places are going to be corn and manioc or cassava. And if you've already done the Edpuzzle, which most of you haven't, I know, I talked about the top 10 most grown crops in the world. And cassava is one of them, and you definitely need to take a look at that Edpuzzle so you know which ones are which. But cassava is this root. It's a root vegetable. Well, it's not. I don't know if it's a root, a tuber, and it's used for all sorts of things. You can make. I think you can make like bread type things out of it. You can make porridge, and it's just used in lots of different things in South America. In Africa, people often grow things like millet and sorghum, and again, these are two grains. Okay, but also they're going to grow things like, yams and other vegetables. Okay, so all sorts of things. Oh, sorry, I forgot about that. So they're also going to be things like yams and sugarcane and plantains, which are a big like starchy banana-like plant, and other vegetables. Okay, so those are all grown in shifting cultivation. So a lot of people see this. One of the downsides of shifting cultivation is that it's seen as really inefficient and polluting because they cut down rainforests. This happens in the tropical rainforest, and they cut these crops down or these plants down, and then, it creates a lot of greenhouse gases and it destroys rainforests. And so a lot of people are kind of, a lot of people want to stop shifting cultivation, but it's controversial, right? Because it is part of people's culture. And so, some people have been practicing shifting cultivation for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so some people are like, it should stop, but then, these are poor farmers and they don't have any other means of making any money. So, it is controversial to just tell them you have to stop shifting cultivation. They don't have any other things to do. They can't farm with tractors and fertilizers and things like that because they can't afford it, right? They don't have money to buy those things. So they have to use shifting cultivation. Whoops. Yeah, so down here, as I pointed out, it says some people want to end shifting cultivation. So if, especially environmentalists would like shifting cultivation to stop because of the impact it has on the environment. And I'm realizing there's not a lot of space to put these notes in. I apologize that this happens to be a pretty long set of notes. I apologize. So, so that's, yeah, that's shifting cultivation. You can see these people working they're switting this plot of land. I'm actually going to show you, I think I'm just going to try to show you a short piece of this video just to give you a visual of what shifting cultivation kind of looks like. Just give me 1 second.
O fogo serve para queimar as folhas e aquela madeira fina para poder plantar, senão não tem que plantar. Se não tirar a folha e nem a madeira, só se for mecanizado.
Eles trabalham porque a necessidade deles plantar para colher, para comer, sobrar alguma saca de algum legume para vender. E porque também não tem incentivo assim do governo para trabalhar com máquinas, terra mecanizada, aí tem que derrubar, tem que queimar. Porque se não queimar, plantar na terra crua não dá. Se a terra for crua, que nem um campo, uma juquira baixa e não for aradado, você não planta lá que não dá nada.
Farmers work at the place where the grasslands meets the secondary forest. Here, farming begins by cutting back vegetation and trees. They also leave another area alone for 5 or even more years to let it grow and recover soil fertility for future crops.
A juquira é um mato fino, que rebone no capim, olha. E capoeira daquela altura, olha. Capoeira alta.
A farmer can't keep planting the same crop year after year because the soil would get tired.
Isso aqui que é que tira a mandioca.
A gente planta num ano.
See, that was manioc. So this is manioc. Now they don't eat this top part. This is the plant, and then down below is a root, and it's the root that they actually eat and harvest.
Aí quando tira a mandioca, aí deixa a capoeira subir de novo. Aí com 4 anos ou 5 a gente já planta, aí bota aquele mesmo lugar e aí planta de novo. Todos os anos tem de ir mudando o local.
A gente é queimado, né? A gente planta o arroz e aquela terra só vai prestar para plantar arroz só com 10 anos só de novo. Aí todo tempo a gente tem que ir derrubando e queimando, derrubando e queimando.
Aí ele derruba e queima, fica aquela cinza, aquele bagaço velho que era da folha antes, aí vira um adubo, aquilo ali planta e dá, tudo que plantar dá. E se for uma terra já assim, de 3 anos trabalhada, era só se for mecanizada e adubada. Aí o incentivo da queima é esse, porque não tem de outra maneira para ele fazer o roçado dele, se não for derrubar e queimar.
O trabalhador rural, agricultor familiar é cumpridor de lei, ele não mexe na reserva legal. Então, se ele abre os 20% do lote dele, ele vai ficar a vida inteira andando naqueles 20% do lote dele.
Okay, that's all I really wanted you to see. It just kind of explains why they do it and just gives you some visuals about shifting agriculture. Okay. Real quickly, I wanted to show you another real quick visual using Google Maps, and then we'll go ahead and go on a break. But here is, if you can see this, I think this is kind of interesting. This is using Google Maps, and you can kind of see here, you know, from the satellite imagery, you can see where they burned the forest, right? And then they're going to plant the crops. and then they just kind of shift around, and then they let the crops, and then they let the land lay fallow for a few years, right? And if you actually pan out, you can see that this is where this is in the Amazon, and you can see basically anywhere there's a road, there's going to be shifting cultivation happening around it. And so people are going to be burning and growing their patches anywhere they can access the into the Amazon. And this is kind of the problem people see with shifting cultivation, is that they're cutting down all this rainforests, okay? But as the farmer said, they didn't really have a choice. You know, they don't have tractors and fertilizers, so this is how they do it. Okay, 9:15, folks. Let's regroup at 9:15. Go ahead and take a break, please. Okay, folks, come on back, please. Come on back. Here we go. Yeah, so welcome back, folks. Hi. Come on back. Yeah, hopefully, if anything, I mean, I don't know how much of a vacation this has felt like. I know many of you were without power, and that's kind of miserable, and, you know, maybe even probably without heat and things like that. So I'm really sorry that if you guys are going through, you know, stressful situations, please reach out to me and just let me know if, you know, you can't get things done, or if, you know, you're in a hotel room. I don't even know what positions people are in. So please let me know if you need any help. I really lucked out. Our power never went out. We had 3 days of really deep, fluffy snow that we went sledding. Basically, we've just been having a you know, kind of a fun time. Because in East Portland, it just dumped about 1 foot of snow. So we kind of got lucky. Anyway, so the next slide I have here is from page 15, actually. And this is just to do an FRQ. We're not going to look at it. We're not going to do it right now together in class, but you can see what it says. It talks about the difference between subsistence and commercial agriculture, and this idea of shifting cultivation. So I would like you to try to do that on your own, and make sure to look at the scoring guide in the back of the book. So you're going to have to do that kind of on your own at some point. Okay. So let's go back to page 17, and I'm going to continue. We're going to talk about another type of agriculture. And that's going to be what's called plantation agriculture. Okay, so this is another type of agriculture that happens in developing countries. But this is actually this is actually not subsistence agriculture. So this is in developing countries, and so it's kind of a weird hybrid. But this is a form of commercial agriculture, but in developing countries. So most of the time it's subsistence agriculture in developing countries. But in this case, this is commercial agriculture. Okay, so plantation agriculture is commercial agriculture. So what is plantation agriculture? Often what's going on is it's owned. The farms, when I say owned, I mean the plantations are owned. Plantations owned by outsiders, but then they're worked by locals. And sometimes when I say by outsiders, they could be huge. They might be multinational companies. Like, think about like Dole, for example, you know, like banana plantations, or, you know, plantations for chocolate and things like that. And we'll talk about what those are. So sometimes they're owned by big, huge corporations. Okay. So generally they're in tropical or subtropical places. And I'll show you the map here in a second. But yeah, so I'll go back to the slides in a second, but I want to show you where plantation agriculture is practiced. So this is a little bit hard to see because, well, for lots of reasons, but you can see, well, because it's small. In the Caribbean, you can see it's this dark, this is plantation agriculture. So it's dark green one, and it's really hard to see. You can see here in the Caribbean and like Haiti, but also here along the coasts of Central America, there's plantation agriculture. Down here into Costa Rica, here in Brazil, on the coasts of Brazil, is a lot of plantation agriculture. And to be clear, what's going on in here, in the Caribbean, it's going to be sugarcane. Okay, that's one of the things. And down here, also in Brazil, it's going to be sugarcane as well. Okay, those are the things. But here in Central America, what they're going to be growing is bananas. It's primarily what they're growing. Okay, some other places where they grow, where there's also up here in Australia, in the northeast coast of Australia is more plantation agriculture. Down here in like Sri Lanka is more plantation agriculture. There's some here in Madagascar, and then places around Africa, different places in Africa, lots of different little pockets of plantation agriculture. Australia, by the way, what's growing here, what plantations are here again are bananas and sugar cane. And, you know, in Sri Lanka, it's going to be tea and cinnamon is another one. I don't think I just spelled cinnamon right there. How do you spell cinnamon? I don't know. Cinnamon, something like that. Anyway, so there's some different plantation agriculture going on there. Okay, so in different places. I'll leave that up for a second. Okay. So a couple things. So one of the things to a vocab term you need to know is this idea of cash crops. What are these cash crops? Cash crops means that it's for sale off the farm. And so obviously that's true of many crops, but anything that's cash crops are usually when they're for, like it says, for sale off the farm, but they're often not necessary. They're kind of like how do I put this? Well, we'll come back. Actually, there's another slide. We'll get back to this. Don't worry, but we'll come back to the topic of cash crops. So some of the crops that they grow are often things like cotton. Those are in the United States. I forgot to show, there was a place in the United States I'll come back to. Sugarcane, coffee, rubber, tobacco, all of these are, and then coca, not cocoa, that's what they make cocaine out of, but cacao or cocoa, okay, and that is made into chocolate. And I'm going to show you real quick. I want to show you, let's see, those are rubber plantations. I just want to go back and make sure that there is a place here in the United States also around here, around the Mississippi River, that we have plantation agriculture, and that's mostly cotton historically. Okay, going back, I want to show you this video here. Let's watch this video and then we'll come back. This is just kind of out of interest, you know, because it can't just be me talking the entire time. But I wanted to show you, hold on. And by the way, these people are speaking, sometimes they're speaking French and sometimes they're speaking Dutch. But I think this is an interesting video, so please watch this.
Avec une production estimée à environ 1,6 million de tonnes, la Côte d'Ivoire est le premier producteur mondial et exportateur de fèves de cacao, un ingrédient qui rentre dans la composition du chocolat.
So, just to be clear what he's talking about, they're in a country in Africa called Côte d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast, and this is a plantation where they're growing cacao, which is same thing as cocoa, and it's what you turn into, it's what you make chocolate out of, okay, in the Ivory Coast.
Cacao is een miljardenbusiness die de wereld verdeelt in snoepers en in sloebers. Wij Westerlingen hebben de luxe om van chocola te kunnen genieten. Maar die luxe is hier in Ivoorkust bij cacaoboeren zoals Ounda Alphonse ver te zoeken.
Je suis en train de chercher un peu de cacao. Vous voyez, ça là, sur le cercle là, cette année-là, j'en ai rien eu. Et puis, prix de cacao là aussi, c'est pas monté, on ne sait pas comment faire.
Alphonse is een van de 700.000 kleine boeren werkzaam in de Ivoriaanse cacaoteelt. Hij oogst en droogt de bonen, maar hij kan er zelf geen chocola van maken.
Donc on est avec là ces fèves là. Est-ce que vous savez ce qu'on en fait?
En tout cas, nous on sait pas comment on prend le cacao là même pour faire.
So this is really interesting. He's talking to him, and by the way, they're speaking French here. That when they speak over, that's Dutch. But anyway, he's asking the farmer, the guy who grows the cocoa beans, what do they use this for? And the guy who's grown it for his entire life doesn't know what these beans are used for, which is kind of interesting.
Comme on dit de planter cacao là, on est là pour planter cacao. Parce qu'on parle que cacao là c'est un manger, mais nous on ne connaît pas comment on prend pour faire.
D'accord, moi j'ai une surprise pour vous.
Ouais.
J'ai là dans dans ma poche là. Vous voyez, ça c'est du chocolat.
Ouais.
C'est avec ça c'est à partir de ces fèves là qu'on fabrique ça.
Bon, c'est chocolat.
Oui.
Et
Vous pouvez goûter, voir.
ah bon.
Non, prenez, c'est pour vous, allez-y.
C'est doux. C'est doux là.
Vous aimez?
C'est vraiment intéressant. Le cacao là, ça bon truc.
Ah bon?
On mange.
Vous aimez ça?
Vraiment, vraiment on aime.
Vous n'avez jamais goûté au chocolat?
Non, on n'a jamais goûté au chocolat. C'est pas aujourd'hui.
Oenda verbouwt al jaren cacao, maar heeft dus nog nooit chocola van dichtbij gezien. Het enige wat hij doet is zijn bonen afleveren bij de tussenhandelaar. Maar nu hij ervan geproefd heeft, is hij meteen zo enthousiast dat hij vindt dat al zijn vrienden het moeten proeven.
Bonjour, papa.
Kora.
Namu.
Mimbi. Gamalo. Lo na ke no na na.
Kosowe.
Ko be na cacao ne. Nya po an lo fe.
Kosowe.
Tamba bo ba da ka bra mi ke. Le lo kala ni. Kana ye ni. Di mo go wore ma. Akala do mo ye do mo lo. Di do no akale mo bon goûter.
C'est doux.
Oh. Nilo tumba bo numba domoni.
Don't know if you caught that, but he said that this is why white people are so healthy. That's it, the chocolate.
Chocolade is nauwelijks verkrijgbaar in Ivoorkust. Bovendien is het daar relatief duur. Een chocoladereep kost hier €2 per stuk. En Alfonse verdient maar €7,50 per dag. Van dat geld moet hij 15 gezinsleden onderhouden en betaalt hij 4 arbeiders. We zijn op de kleine plantage van Oenda Alphonse, die druk bezig is om samen met zijn arbeiders de rijpe cacaovruchten te oogsten.
Alors expliquez-nous qu'est-ce que vous faites là en ce moment?
Pour que ne rentre pas dedans. Pour s'armenter bien. Voilà. Ici 5 jours avant de
Zo begint iedere reep chocolade als een bergje bonen op een bedje van bananenbladeren. Maar ook hier op de plantage blijken de arbeiders niet op de hoogte van het verdere verloop van de wereldwijde chocoladeketen.
Alors le cacao, est-ce que vous savez ce qu'on en fait?
On plante le cacao, nous on ne sait pas ce que le cacao s'en va faire là-bas.
Alphonse, là, une surprise, le cacao, alors les gens l'utilisent pour faire le chocolat.
C'est ça, vous ne pouvez voir. C'est mangé pour les bras là. C'est ça qui s'appelle chocolat. Le cacao on prend pour faire.
Ndiamo, il y a quand on a bon, tu vas faire mon bari, coco bébo, quelqu'un va faire. Ndiamo, de quoi vous cacao ya de no ma cacao ma be bo wa yole
ya baba blu ke kana o
mais moi cacao yo la ma be di cacania
nos vieux parents là disent que cacao là on prend pour fabriquer du vin.
Voilà, vin. Nous quand on boit du vin là, on pense que c'est le cacao.
C'est le cacao.
Voilà.
Le cacao qui est transformé en liquide.
Autre chose encore. Pour préparer ça là, on met dans les casseroles ou bien ça comment ça sort.
Ça va à l'usine. C'est une grande usine où vous avez des coins pour piler. Vous faites de la poudre, puis d'autres produits qu'on mélange et puis ça devient comme ça.
Mais c'est la graine de ça là.
Oui, ça c'est les fèves qui donnent ça.
Est-ce que c'est cela que vous avez mangé et puis votre corps est bien propre à travers le chocolat?
Manger beaucoup.
Oui.
Non, c'est pas le chocolat qui a rendu.
Mais vraiment non, parce que
comme les enfants n'ont pas mangé aussi, je vais garder chanter là, je vais la montrer.
Ouais, mais c'est pas tout.
Okay, so that's a little bit about some plantation agriculture. I find that to be an interesting video, and kind of sad that the people who actually have who grow the crops don't actually get to enjoy chocolate. Chocolate is for wealthy people in developed countries, and So anyway, that's just a little video explaining that. Okay, so let's go back. Let's not going to worry about the Google Maps this time. Plantation. This is, I think, a tea plantation, and this is a rubber plantation. And again, the plantation places are in the Caribbean, on the coasts of Central America, around South America, and some places in Africa. Ivory Coast that we were just looking at is right around in this area. Okay, so some cocoa or cacao grown there. Okay, so let's move on to the next type of agriculture, and that is wet rice farming. So actually, there's another. So if you turn to page 18. There is another FRQ that I'd like you to practice. So that's going to be, yeah, on page 18. So just make note of that you need to go back and do that. Let's now skip ahead to page 20. And we're going to talk about another type of subsistence farming called wet rice farming. Okay, so it's called wet rice farming because they use flooded fields for this. Okay, so some aspects, again, we're on page 20 now. Some aspects of wet rice farming. So it's by far Asia's most important food source, rice. It's very commonly used, grown throughout East Asia and South Asia. And I'll show you. So wet rice farming is, it's a little hard to differentiate here. It's a little bit confusing, but it's this area. I'll try to, actually, sorry, it's around here. This is wet rice farming, kind of in the parts of India, and then a big part of Southeast Asia, right? And this is all wet rice farming here, Southeast Asia and East Asia, and up here into Korea and into Japan. That's all wet rice farming, part of the Philippines here as well. So it's a little hard to see and a little hard to differentiate with some of the other ones, but primarily wet rice farming is in India. Just to be clear, so we've got in India, Bangladesh, other important places, of course, like Vietnam, China, Japan, Korea, and then yeah, those are some of the biggest ones. Okay, so that's wet rice farming. And again, we're on page 20. So we'll come back to this map, but it comes to some of the things to note about wet rice farming. So seedlings, and I'll show you a video of this. So seedlings are planted in flooded fields. And these fields, I'm not sure why this is, but you need to apparently know these terms. The flooded fields is called a sawah in Indonesia. And so that's another important place where this is grown, Indonesia. And then most of the time it's called a paddy. A rice paddy is what often people call it. And that the paddy is actually a word from Malaysia. It's a Malaysian word, which I think actually means rice. So that's what this idea of a flooded fields is. So whoops. And here you can see an example of those flooded fields. And I'm going to show you a quick video about that as well. And then you also see these terracing. You often see the fields are terraced, and these are obviously not naturally terraced. These are carved into the hillsides. And this is a way to make it so if you want to grow crops in an area that is mountainous, well, you can't because everything would just kind of erode down the hill. But if you create terraces, then you can create flat areas where you could flood these fields and still grow rice. Okay. So you also have this idea of double cropping. And so double cropping, especially in places that are, that are hot enough. So there's often another crop in the drier winter. So, and that might seem a little counterintuitive to us Oregonians, but in most places that are like subtropical, the winter is often drier than the summer. And so there could be another crop, and it could be like, might often be wheat, would be another crop that they would grow at the same time. It's called double cropping. So you'd grow rice in the summer when it's hot and it's wet, and then you might grow wheat in the drier winter. Remember, wheat has to be a little bit drier. So, and then there's this idea of, for geographers, they alter the landscape. And so this is an important feature. So they do this flooding and then terracing and, something to impact, what is the impact of altering the landscape? And this is going to be actually an FRQ question, but the impact is going to be, what you have things like, now you have more wetlands. What are some other impacts? You might have more things like more mosquitoes, which might spread disease. But you also have things like, it might damage water quality because you might be using some fertilizers in there or things like that. So anyway, it just has it can have a pretty huge impact on the kind of the environment or the landscape of the place. And again, you guys are going to do an FRQ in a whenever you get to it. It's on page 22, and it kind of references this idea of the impact of subsistence farming, subsistence wet rice farming. So I did want to show you. Let's see where. Let's go back. Oh, we already identified where they grow it. India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Vietnam, etc. Let's watch this video. And it kind of shows it's about the Philippines, and hopefully, yeah, let's watch this video. So this kind of shows you a little bit about, kind of what is wet rice farming all about.
Rice farming is a messy, physically demanding, and extremely labor-intensive business. At busy times of the year, people do the rounds of the fields belonging to their extended family and their close friends. On a day like this, Edna and Ray won't finish work in the fields until sunset. In the early morning, the temperature is already 30 degrees.
That's Celsius, folks.
Yet it's a very Filipino thing to look on the bright side of hard work. And the people of Tubo Tubo have turned the daily grind of rice farming into a social occasion.
Of course, we help one another here a lot. Because if we don't, the work won't get done quickly enough. If we can't manage the planting or the harvest on our own, people come and help us. Then we'll go and help them in return. It's a two-way process. It's a tough way of life, but it's a happy one.
In November, when the heavy rains of the wet season are starting to die down, there are often 2 or 3 different field activities going on at the same time. Ray, Edna and company have moved on to another friend's land where they're planting young seedlings. Compared with many other Asia-Pacific countries, agriculture in the Philippines has been very slow to modernize. The vast majority of the work is still done by muscle power. Ray and Edna's carabao, or water buffalo, is one of their most treasured possessions and the motive power for all the really strenuous tasks in the rice fields. There are machines available, but the cost is beyond the reach of most farmers. Nobody likes the idea of not being able to pay off a loan.
There are some people who are better off. Others, though, are in debt. What happens in farming here in the Philippines is that most of what you earn from the harvest goes towards paying off what you owe. My neighbor down the road has a new tractor. It cost
56,000 pesos, including the carrier and the implements for digging and harrowing. It's Japanese, a Kubota. It's very reliable. With a machine like that, you use it for your own land and you hire it to other farmers who don't have machines and earn money that way. So I guess we have made some progress. It's not so tiring working on the land as it used to be.
Kasi unang-una maginhawang mga tao.
By the middle of the afternoon, Ray and Edna are into their third task of the day in the rice fields. This time, it's harvesting on land belonging to one of Ray's cousins.
For us, harvest time is the best season of the year because this is when we see the results of all the months of hard work we put into growing the rice. Farmers have rice to sell, and that means the family budget is in better shape. This is also the time to get ready for planting new rice, so we'll have some more income from that too. Sometimes there are bad harvests, though. Sometimes we get typhoons. We also have to cope with what's called rice plague, which we can do nothing to control, especially if it happens when the rice is about to sprout shoots. Some you win, some you lose, some you break even.
So you can see there, some people do have some machines, some simple machines that allow them to kind of, you know, be a little bit more efficient. But most of the time, a lot of that stuff, subsistence farming is just done by hand. Okay, the last place we're going to go is to, this one is in your textbook, and it's kind of a final topic. It's called, and again, we're still on page 20. This is called subsistence farming, where rice is not dominant. And so so this is a place where it's too dry for rice. Rice often needs to be in flooded fields. And so some of the places where they practice this type of agriculture is going to be in other places in the developing world. So you can see, you know, in the Andes, you're going to have subsistence agriculture that's not wet rice dominant. You're going to be growing potatoes and other things like that. In South America, or sorry, Central America, you're going to have these areas that are not wet rice dominant. Subsistence farming, you're going to probably be growing corn and things like that. In here in India, you're going to have quite a bit of non-rice subsistence farming, and again, there's probably going to be, you know, mostly wheat grown there. And then other parts of Asia, the drier parts of China, and then in here into the drier parts of Southeast Asia are going to be subsistence farming, but where it's not wet rice dominant. So that's just another category. I'm not sure how important this necessarily is, but go ahead and identify those on your map. And just some brief notes, and I'll come back to that, is that wheat is most important, but they also grow things like millet and oats and corn, sorghum again, which is a cereal crop, soybeans. Those are all related to, are all grown in this area that's not, it's too dry for rice, so they grow things like, yeah, all these other plants. And again, those places, hopefully you'll be able to kind of identify some of those places. It's kind of hard to see on the map, but in general, kind of India, I'll just make, we can make a list. Central America, the Andes, you know, India, northern China. So in general, there's kind of those places around that are growing these crops. Okay, folks. Well, I'm glad you guys were able to be here with me today. Again, please try to get caught up as much as you can on some of the things that are still outstanding. So if you haven't done part 2 of the political geography FRQ, please do that. If you haven't done the My AP multiple choice test, please do that. And if you haven't looked at the Ed puzzle and done that, and by the way, it's not graded on your scores. It's just going to be graded that you completed it. Okay. Folks, I hope you have a great weekend. We will keep going at Monday. Take good care of yourselves. See you later. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ms. Fox.
See ya.
Mr. Fox, I just had a quick question about the political geography FRQ part 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm so sorry. The day that I was planning on doing it, I lost power, and I still don't have power, so I've just been at people's houses for the moment. But
Yeah.
so I haven't done it yet. But I'm looking at it now, and I'm not completely sure. Like, what can we use to actually answer the questions? Are we just pulling from our knowledge, or can we use the textbook? Or I'm not completely sure how you'd like us to answer it.
Yeah, good question. I mean, you know, obviously it's a technically an open note thing because, you know, I can't really control what you're doing. And I kind of tried to write this one where it was, yeah, I mean, you can use your notes. I would try not to so much just to you know, see how much you can do on your own. But you know, there's no real way I can kind of police that. So, yeah. I don't know. I would try to do it with just your knowledge as much as possible, just to practice, you know. But it was written with the knowledge, with knowing that that you know that you're probably going to use your notes as an assist to assist you as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we're just kind of answering it like we answered the first one, like just like kind of full sentence like answers, just kind of explaining.
Yeah. Yeah, but in this case, you know, since it's not timed and things like that, my expectation is, you know, it's gonna be a lot more detail oriented and that sort of thing.
Oh, okay. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and Mr. Fox, sorry, one last thing. I was wondering, would you be able to send the classroom recording to me? Because I missed the first part of class. I can send an email too, just as a reminder.
Yeah.
But that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, because a lot of people missed today. So I'm actually going to post it on Google Classroom.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So I'll post that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fox.
Yeah, see ya.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Jake.
Fox. Yeah, I was just going to ask, when should I take the part 1 FRQ?
Yeah, so yeah, sorry, it's taken, obviously things got in the way. I think what I'm just going to ask you to do, Jake, is just kind of go ahead and do it on your own. I know it's not ideal, and yeah, just go ahead and do the first one on your own. I would try to set a timer for like 35 minutes just to kind of practice, so you know you're not taking forever. But I'm just going to kind of leave it on the honesty policy. I don't know what else to do. Yeah, just try to do it in about 35 minutes, and just do it on your own and get it to me as soon as you can. Okay.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. See ya.